They laughed, they clinked their glasses, and they carried on as if I wasn't even in the room. At my own son's party, I was invisible, unwanted, dismissed like I didn't belong. But the smiles didn't last long, because when the waiter finally placed the check on the table, every head turned, and the name written across that bill was mine. Tell me, have you ever been ignored, only to watch everyone fall silent when they realized who was really footing the bill? Share it in the comments. Now let's get into today's tale. The day started full of excitement. My son was turning 30, a milestone, and he wanted to celebrate with friends and family at a nice restaurant downtown. I was proud of him, proud of the man he had become, proud that he wanted me there. I dressed carefully, wrapped his gift, and walked into the restaurant with a smile. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt the shift. Conversations quieted for a second, then picked back up, flowing right past me as though I were furniture. My son's friends clustered around him, laughing, raising glasses, snapping photos. His wife flitted about, greeting people, chatting loudly, barely glancing my way. I found a seat near the end of the long table, smiling politely, waiting for someone, anyone, to bring me into the circle. But they didn't. They leaned across me to talk, laughed at jokes I wasn't included in, turned their shoulders just enough to block me from joining. At first, I told myself it was fine. It was his night, after all. I didn't need the spotlight. I sipped my water, folded my napkin, and tried to be content, just being present. But as the evening wore on, the sting grew sharper. Plates arrived, laughter filled the air, wine glasses clinked, and through it all I was invisible. When I tried to speak, voices rolled over mine. When I offered a toast, no one lifted their glass. At one point, his wife leaned across me, smiling brightly at another guest. "Isn't this wonderful? Everyone's here who matters." I felt the words slice through me. Everyone who matters. I excused myself to the restroom, standing at the sink, staring at my reflection. My lipstick was still in place, my dress neat, my hair brushed carefully. I didn't look invisible. So why did they treat me as though I was? I took a deep breath, returned to the table, and sat quietly. If they wanted to erase me, let them. I wasn't there for them. I was there for my son. But fate, it seems, had other plans. Because when the final plates were cleared, when the laughter died down and the waiter approached with a leather folder in hand, the whole mood shifted. He set the bill gently on the table and with a polite nod said, "It's all under her name," and every head turned, straight toward me. For a moment, no one breathed. Forks froze halfway to mouths, glasses hung in midair. The sound of the waiter's footsteps faded, leaving only the heavy silence of a room full of people caught off guard. "All under her name." The words echoed in the air. Slowly, eyes shifted toward me, the woman they had spent the entire evening pretending not to see. My son's friends, who hadn't bothered to shake my hand. My daughter-in-law, who had brushed past me as if I were nothing more than an afterthought. Even my son himself blinked, stunned. I sat still, folding my hands neatly in my lap. I didn't rush to explain. I didn't fumble for my wallet. I simply let them stare. Finally, someone coughed. A cousin, maybe. "So, you're covering this?" The question hung awkwardly, like a balloon losing air. "Yes," I said simply. My voice was calm, steady. "It's all taken care of." You could almost feel the tension release, relief washing over the table. Laughter stumbled back in, voices lifted again, but this time they were forced to acknowledge me. "Thank you so much," someone blurted. "That's incredibly generous. We really appreciate it." The same mouths that had ignored me for hours were now spilling gratitude, dripping with sweetness that felt just a little too sudden. I nodded politely, taking a sip of water, not offering more than a small smile, because I knew what was really happening. They weren't thanking me out of love. They were thanking me because the bill was big, and none of them wanted to be stuck with it. My daughter-in-law leaned closer, her voice syrupy. "Oh, we didn't realize you'd be handling this." "You should have said something." I turned my head slowly, meeting her eyes. Why would I need to say anything? I was invisible, remember? Her cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth, then shut it again, looking away. My son shifted in his chair, clearing his throat. "Mom, I didn't expect... Thank you. Really." For a moment I saw the boy he once was, the child who used to tug at my sleeve for help, who once believed I could fix anything. And now, even as a grown man, he still leaned on me without even realizing it. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had spent the evening acting as if I didn't belong, as if I were a shadow on the wall. But when the numbers came, when the weight of reality landed, it was my name on the line, my card, my responsibility, my generosity. And suddenly the invisible woman was the center of it all. The rest of the evening carried on, but the tone had changed. Conversations included me now. People asked me questions, drew me into stories, raised glasses in my direction. Too late, of course. I knew the truth. They hadn't discovered my worth. They had discovered my wallet. Still, I sat there quietly, letting them scramble, letting them plaster over the awkwardness with forced warmth, because sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's power. The kind of power that waits for the right moment to remind everyone who's really carrying the weight. And that night, the weight of the party, every plate, every drink, every laugh, had landed squarely in my lap. That night, after the party ended and the crowd drifted out into the cool air, I stayed behind for a moment. The waiters cleared tables around me, the laughter of the evening fading into silence. I looked down at the bill still folded neatly inside its leather case, my signature scrawled across the receipt. It wasn't the money that stung. I had paid larger bills before. Birthdays, graduations, holidays. I had always been the one to step up, to make sure no one went without. I had done it quietly, without asking for thanks, because that's what mothers do. No, what cut deep was the way they erased me until they needed me. I thought back to years earlier, late nights cooking when my son had friends over, cleaning up after everyone else had gone home. I thought of school trips I had funded when money was tight, the sports gear I bought, the countless times I put my own needs aside so he could have what he wanted. And now, here I was, at his milestone birthday, the one where I should have been seated proudly at his side, acknowledged for everything I had poured into his life. Instead, I was pushed to the edges, talked over, ignored, until the bill came. It was almost laughable. To them, I wasn't a guest. I wasn't family. I was a credit card, a signature on a receipt, a convenient safety net they didn't even bother to see until it was time to lean on it. I sat there, letting the memories wash over me, the weight of years spent giving, and the silence of being forgotten. And yet, something shifted inside me that night, because in that awkward moment when their laughter stopped and their heads swiveled toward me, I saw the truth in their faces. They might ignore me in conversation, crop me out of photos, brush me aside when the wine flowed and the music played. But when it came down to it, I was the one holding the ground beneath them. They knew it. I knew it. And no amount of false politeness after the fact could change it. I walked out of that restaurant with my head higher than it had been all evening. Not because I had bought their approval. They could keep their hollow thanks. But because I finally understood the quiet power I carried. I didn't need their validation. The check itself was proof. Proof that they could laugh without me, but they couldn't celebrate without me. Proof that even in their dismissal, I was the one they relied on. And perhaps the sweetest part was this. They didn't see it coming. They thought they'd made me invisible. But the bill made me undeniable. The days after the party were almost comical. My phone, usually quiet, suddenly lit up with messages. Thank you again for such a wonderful evening. We couldn't have done it without you. You're so generous. We're lucky to have you. Lucky to have me. The same people who leaned across me at the table, who let conversations flow right past me, who pretended I wasn't even sitting there. Now they couldn't type out thank yous fast enough. I didn't respond right away. I let the messages sit there, glowing on the screen, proof of how quickly their tune had changed once the check bore my name. A few even called. Cousins I hadn't heard from in months suddenly wanted to catch up. My daughter-in-law left a voicemail, her voice sugary sweet, saying how much she appreciated me, how she was so glad we're family. But I remembered her words at the table, everyone who matters, and I remembered the way she had leaned past me, smiling for everyone else. Now, because the bill had been mine, I mattered again. When I visited my son later that week, he hugged me longer than usual. Mom, I know we didn't make you feel as included as we should have. I'm sorry, but thank you for covering everything. It meant a lot. I looked at him, my boy who had grown into a man, but still hadn't outgrown leaning on me. I smiled softly. You're welcome. But don't thank me for the money. Thank me for showing up, even when no one noticed. His face reddened. He nodded, but he didn't argue, because deep down, he knew it was true. At the next gathering, the change was impossible to miss. They pulled out chairs for me, they asked me questions, they poured me wine, made sure I was in the photos. On the surface, it might have looked like respect, but I knew better. It wasn't respect. It was guilt. It was calculation. They had seen what happened when the bill came due, and they didn't want to be caught off guard again. And so I sat, polite, answering their questions, letting them clink glasses in my direction. But inside, I smiled at the irony, because nothing reveals true colors faster than money. And that night at the restaurant, when the waiter said, "It's under her name," their colors had been laid bare. They hadn't ignored me because I didn't matter. They had ignored me because they assumed I'd always be there, silent and dependable, paying the price without protest. And they were right, until the bill forced them to see me. Now they tried to rewrite the story, but it was too late. I'd seen the truth in their faces, in the silence that followed the waiter's words, and no amount of false warmth could erase that memory. It lingered, sharp and satisfying, the moment they realized the invisible woman was the one holding the pen. In the quiet days that followed, I kept thinking about that moment, the waiter setting down the folder, the words, "It's under her name," hanging in the air, the way every face turned toward me. It played in my mind not with bitterness, but with clarity, because it wasn't just about a dinner bill. It was about something much deeper. For years, I had given without asking. I had shown up, paid quietly, supported silently. Birthdays, holidays, emergencies. I had always been the one they leaned on. And over time, that steady giving had turned me invisible in their eyes. They stopped seeing me as a person, stopped valuing the heart behind the gesture. To them, I was background, until the money reminded them otherwise. And that, I realized, was the core of it. Respect should never come with a price tag. Appreciation shouldn't only surface when a bill lands on the table. But in families, it often does. People take the steady ones for granted, the ones who never falter, the ones who always pay the tab. That night taught me something important. Being invisible doesn't mean you don't matter. Sometimes it means you matter more than they want to admit. Because when the weight of responsibility comes crashing down, it's often the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, who are carrying it all along. I thought of the look on my daughter-in-law's face when I told her, "Why would I need to say anything? I was invisible, remember?" That moment said more than any toast or speech ever could. And I thought of my son, his awkward hug, his soft apology. He didn't have to say it out loud, but I could see it in his eyes. He knew now. He understood. I don't need to be in every photo. I don't need to be the loudest voice at the table. But I do deserve respect before the bill arrives, not just after. And that's the part they'll remember long after the receipt is forgotten. Because the truth is, people forget who made the party possible. They forget who kept the lights on, who made sure the glasses were filled. But the check, the moment of truth, always reveals who was really behind it all. And sometimes, being underestimated is its own kind of power. I walked away from that night with something far more valuable than their forced gratitude. I walked away with the reminder that my worth isn't tied to their attention. It's tied to the life I've built, the sacrifices I've made, and the quiet strength they'll never erase. They ignored me, but when the bill arrived, they couldn't. And maybe, just maybe, that was the justice I didn't know I needed. So here's what I've learned. Sometimes the deepest hurt doesn't come from strangers, but from the people closest to you, when they act like you don't matter. At that party, I was ignored, brushed aside, treated like I was invisible. But when the truth showed up in the form of a bill, suddenly I was the one everyone saw. It wasn't about money, it was about respect, about remembering that the ones you take for granted are often the ones holding everything together. Tell me, have you ever been overlooked, only to prove in the end that you were the one holding the real weight? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And stay with us, because there are more tales of quiet justice and unexpected turns still to come.